Forget everything you know about fairy tale weddings. In medieval Europe, royal marriages were less about love and more about power, politics, and survival. For the young nobles at the center of these alliances, the wedding day was not the happiest moment of their lives. It was the beginning of a trial by ordeal, a gauntlet of rituals and expectations so bizarre and brutal that most modern people wouldn't last a single day. From the moment a marriage was arranged, the couple's fate was sealed, and every step of the process was designed to reinforce the authority of the crown, the church, and the family, often at the expense of the bride and groom's dignity, freedom, and even safety. The ordeal began long before the vows were exchanged. Royal children were often betrothed before they could walk, their futures traded like chess pieces in the endless game of dynastic politics. A princess might be promised to a foreign prince she'd never met, her value calculated in terms of land, alliances, and dowries. The negotiations could drag on for years, with armies and kingdoms hanging in the balance. By the time the wedding day arrived, the bride and groom were strangers to each other, their union less a celebration than a public transaction. Preparation for the ceremony was its own form of torment. The bride, usually a teenager, was subjected to a battery of rituals meant to prove her purity and suitability. Her body was inspected by matrons and midwives, her lineage scrutinized by priests and courtiers. She was bathed, perfumed, and dressed in layers of heavy silk and velvet, her hair braided with ribbons and jewels. The weight of her attire alone could be suffocating. But the real pressure came from the eyes of the court. Every gesture, every blush, every tear was noted and judged. For the groom, the rituals were no less invasive. He was expected to demonstrate his virility and readiness to rule, sometimes undergoing public tests of strength, skill, or piety. The wedding ceremony itself was a spectacle of power and pageantry. The church was filled with nobles, clergy, and ambassadors, all eager to witness the union that would shape the fate of nations. The bride and groom stood before the altar, reciting vows in a language they might barely understand, surrounded by relics and icons meant to sanctify the marriage. But beneath the solemn prayers and hymns, there was an undercurrent of anxiety. The church's blessing was not just a religious formality, it was a binding contract enforced by law and custom. Any hint of reluctance, any sign of weakness, could be grounds for scandal or annulment. Yet the strangest and most humiliating rituals were reserved for the wedding night. In many royal courts, the consummation of the marriage was a public affair, sometimes literally. The newlyweds were escorted to their bedchamber by a procession of relatives and courtiers, who would watch as the couple undressed and climbed into bed. The curtains might be drawn, but the audience remained, listening for the telltale sounds that would confirm the union had been sealed. In some cases, priest or noble would inspect the bedsheets the next morning for proof of the bride's virginity, a bloody token that could determine the legitimacy of future heirs. For the young royals, these rituals were a test of endurance as much as tradition. The pressure to perform, to please, to produce an heir was immense. Failure was not an option. A bride who failed to bleed, a groom who failed to consummate, could face humiliation, exile, or worse. The court gossiped endlessly about the couple's performance, and rumors of impotence or infidelity could spark political crises that threatened entire kingdoms. But the ordeal didn't end with the wedding night. In the days and weeks that followed, the couple was subjected to a barrage of ceremonies, feasts, and inspections. Every aspect of their relationship was scrutinized by family, clergy, and courtiers. Their private lives became public property, their bodies and emotions tools of statecraft. For many, the wedding was not a beginning, but the first in a long series of trials that would define and often destroy their lives. This was the reality of royal marriage in the Middle Ages, a labyrinth of rituals designed to bind individuals to families, families to dynasties, and dynasties to the ever-shifting fortunes of power. For the men and women at the center of these alliances, survival depended on their ability to navigate a world where love was a luxury and ritual was everything. And for anyone unprepared for the twisted customs of the medieval court, the wedding day was just the start of a lifelong ordeal. If the wedding day was a trial, the days that followed were an unending test of endurance, obedience, and survival. For royal couples, marriage meant stepping into a world where personal desires were irrelevant and every action was dictated by tradition, superstition, and the ever-watchful eyes of the court. The rituals didn't end with the exchange of vows. They only intensified, weaving the bride and groom into a web of obligations that would define the rest of their lives. Immediately after the wedding, the newlyweds were thrust into a series of elaborate celebrations that could last for days or even weeks. The feasts were legendary for their excess. Tables groaned under the weight of roasted peacocks, gilded pastries, and rivers of wine. But behind the spectacle, the pressure was suffocating. Every guest was a potential spy, every toast a coded message, every dance a display of political alliances. The couple was expected to play their parts flawlessly, smiling through exhaustion, performing carefully choreographed rituals of affection, and fielding endless scrutiny from relatives and rivals alike. One of the most grueling customs was the bedding ceremony. In many courts, the consummation of the marriage was a public event, witnessed by a select group of nobles, clergy, and family members. The couple was led to the bridal chamber amid raucous songs and bawdy jokes, their every movement watched and commented on. The bed itself was often inspected beforehand to ensure it was properly prepared fresh linens. Symbolic herbs and tokens of fertility were arranged with almost religious care. Once inside, the couple was expected to undress and lie together, while the witnesses offered prayers or ribald encouragement, sometimes remaining in the room until the act was completed or at least convincingly begun. The next morning, the sheets would be examined for blood, and the results would be announced to the court, proof, or lack thereof, that the marriage had been properly sealed. For royal brides, this ritual was especially fraught. Expectation of virginity was absolute, and failure to produce the evidence could spell disaster. Accusations of impurity could lead to annulment, disgrace, or even execution. In some cases, the bride's mother or a trusted attendant would secretly stain the sheets to avoid scandal. But such deceptions were dangerous if discovered. The consequences could be fatal. For grooms, the pressure was different, but no less intense. A failure to perform could be interpreted as impotence, a sign of weakness that could undermine their legitimacy as rulers and husbands. Beyond the bedchamber, the couple faced a barrage of rituals meant to cement their union in the eyes of the court and the church. They were paraded through the city in grand processions, showered with gifts from nobles and foreign envoys, and subjected to endless rounds of banquets, tournaments, and public blessings. Each event was an opportunity for allies to demonstrate loyalty or for enemies to plot intrigue. The couple's every gesture was analyzed for signs of affection, discord, or political maneuvering. Even their private conversations were often monitored by servants or spies, ensuring that no secret went unnoticed. The pressure to produce an heir was immediate and relentless. From the moment the marriage was consummated, the bride's fertility became a matter of state. Her diet, movements, and even her dreams were scrutinized for signs of pregnancy. Court physicians and midwives offered endless advice and remedies, some harmless, others dangerous. If months passed without a pregnancy, blame was quickly assigned, usually to the bride. Rumors of curses, witchcraft, or divine displeasure spread like wildfire, and the couple could find themselves at the center of a scandal that threatened not just their happiness, but the stability of the entire realm. For many royal couples, the rituals of marriage became a daily ordeal. The constant scrutiny, the pressure to produce an heir, the endless cycle of public appearances and private inspections all combined to create an atmosphere of anxiety and fear. Marriages that began as political alliances often devolved into power struggles, with spouses pitted against each other by ambitious relatives, scheming courtiers, and the demands of the crown. The personal cost was immense. Depression, isolation, even madness were common among those who could not bear the weight of their roles. In this world, survival depended on more than just obedience. It required cunning, resilience, and an ability to play the game of appearances better than anyone else. Some royal brides and grooms became masters of deception, learning to hide their true feelings behind carefully crafted masks. Others rebelled, seeking solace in forbidden romances or secret alliances. But for most, the rituals of royal marriage were an inescapable prison, a daily reminder that in the medieval court, love was a luxury, and survival was never guaranteed. As the initial spectacle of the royal wedding faded, the true test of survival began. For the newlyweds, married life in the medieval court was a relentless performance, where every day brought new rituals, new dangers, and new demands. The union was never private, every moment, from their first meal together to the birth of their children, was subject to scrutiny and manipulation by powerful families, clergy, and political rivals. The pressure to produce an heir was constant and all-consuming. The queen's body became a vessel for dynastic ambition, her fertility a matter of state. If a pregnancy did not occur quickly, blame and suspicion fell squarely on her shoulders. Remedies ranged from the merely uncomfortable and less prayers, restrictive diets, and bizarre folk treatments to the outright dangerous, including potions and superstitious rituals administered by court physicians. If a child was born, the ordeal continued. The birth itself was often a public event, with witnesses crowding the chamber to confirm the legitimacy of the heir. Any sign of weakness in the newborn or the mother could trigger rumors of infidelity, curses, or divine punishment. Even outside the royal bedchamber, the couple's lives were shaped by a labyrinth of courtly rituals and expectations. The king and queen were expected to embody the virtues and power of the realm, attending endless ceremonies, religious observances, and diplomatic functions. Each event was fraught with peril. One perceived slight could ignite a feud or topple an alliance. The queen, especially, was vulnerable to slander and intrigue. A misplaced smile, a whispered conversation, or an innocent friendship could be twisted into evidence of betrayal or scandal. Many queens found themselves isolated, surrounded by spies and rivals with little hope of genuine friendship or trust. For the king, the burden was different but equally heavy. He was expected to be strong, decisive, and above all, fertile. Any sign of weakness, illness, indecision, or failure to produce an heir could be exploited by enemies both inside and outside the court. Kings who faltered often faced rebellion, assassination, or deposition. The pressure to maintain authority and project an image of invincibility was relentless, leaving little room for vulnerability or personal happiness. The rituals of royal marriage extended even to death. If a queen died in childbirth, as many did, her body was displayed in state. Her virtues extolled in elaborate ceremonies, and her memory used to reinforce the legitimacy of her children. If a king died without an heir, the kingdom could plunge into chaos, with rival factions vying for the throne and civil war erupting over questions of succession. The stakes were always high, and the consequences of failure could be catastrophic. Through it all, the personal desires and well-being of the royal couple were secondary to the needs of the dynasty and the realm. Love, if it existed, was a fragile luxury, often sacrificed on the altar of duty and survival. Many royal marriages ended in tragedy, betrayal, madness, exile, or even execution. Some couples managed to find companionship or mutual respect amid the turmoil. But for most, the rituals of marriage were a lifelong ordeal, endured for the sake of power and legacy. In the end, the twisted rituals of medieval royal weddings reveal a world where individuals were pawns in a much larger game, their fates determined by forces beyond their control. The demands of tradition, the hunger for power, and the fear of scandal created an environment where survival required constant vigilance, adaptability, and luck. For anyone unprepared for the realities of the medieval court, a royal marriage was not a dream come true, but a test of endurance few could pass, and a reminder that beneath the glittering surface of history's grandest ceremonies, the cost of power was often paid in suffering and silence.